Are we in Washington? He is a professor of conflict resolution at George Mason University and author of What is Enlightenment? Continuity or Rupture in the Wake of the Arab Uprisings. Mohammed, thank you for joining. I understand you heard a good part of the program in the first part.
これまで見たのかな
One issue that I think is really interesting in all this is that the United States has one of the most important military bases in its possession, sitting right in the center of Qatar. And we have Donald Trump siding with...
これでいい結構なんかね、話してるの難しいんだよね。僕、もうさっき全部見たけど。これ今、だからドナルド・トランプがなぜサウジ寄りになってるかって話からね。でサウジアラビアとカタールで、まあ、そもそもサウジのカタールをこう切ったんですよね。で、ドナルド・トランプがサウジに着いたけど、カタールってアメリカ基地があるんでね。
はい。
直接トランプ批判できないけど、まあ、そこら辺のとこか。
The Saudis, and we have American troops sitting in there.
アメリカントループシティでっていうのは、カタール
I don't think, given past Saudi behavior, reckless behavior, I would underline that it could be a possible military move, and American personnel are sitting there. Again, I wonder if anybody in the White House in Riyadh thought this through. They usually don't. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Well, it seems to be a good test for the Trump foreign policy to experiment with this needed reconciliation between classical alliances with the Arab world, especially the Gulf and Qatar in particular, and the new paradigm of counterterrorism. And it seems that the Riyadh meeting was a strong trigger event of this new conflict between the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Egyptians on the one hand, and the Qataris.
これ、バーレーンって言ってるのはエジプトだよね。
On the other. And I'm asking myself, is this a high time for an implosion of the GCC?
Yeah.
Apparently,
GCC ってのはガルフ湾岸諸国ね。
there is this strong push for counterterrorism and isolation of Qatar, but at the same time, there is missing half of the currency or the other side of the coin. We don't know where this strategic alliance with Qatar is hidden, and I think this is a $64,000 question.
Let's go back to Tehran. Well, I think it's very interesting is that, I truly believe that the region can take care of its own problems all on its own. If it was
この人はテヘランのイランの人ね。
allowed to, and we haven't seen that. We've seen colonialism, neo-colonialism, and we've seen what we have here today. But what's really interesting with this spat with Qatar, that it is actually bringing in more outsiders, though not so far away. Iran does play a role right here. Turkey may be sending troops.
トルコもトゥループトゥーだカタールね。それからもちろんイランはカタール支援してるね。
To Qatar. Oh my goodness, a NATO member. Oh, this makes it even more sweeter and more complex here. And of course, Russia has offered its good services to negotiate. It can talk to everybody. And the U.S. cannot always say that. I mean, so is this a kind of a new wave of maybe a broader regional approach to start resolving these problems? And can they be a mediating force on Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia just seems so thick-headed and stubborn and not.
サウジアラビアちょっと頑固だよって言ってんだよね。
It just doesn't see reality. Go ahead.
See reality. 現実的じゃない。
I think we can derive 2 points with regard to what's
二つの点がデライブと起こる。
The last 10 days or so here. One point is that the Qatari government has been in the service of the United States for many years.
Sure.
They paid $1 billion, built a military base, and just gave it to Americans. We have about 11,000 American troops stationed there. And this is a signal for other U.S. allies that you get a president like Trump, or you get some establishment that for some reason doesn't like you, and they just forget about all the services that you have provided for many years. This is a sign that you cannot really trust the Americans when it comes to foreign policy, because Americans, it seems, don't know how to do foreign policy. The president says one thing, Rex Tillerson says something else. There's a big mess going on in Washington. So this is point number one. The second point that I think is very important is that historically the GCC and the southern part of the Persian Gulf has been ruled and influenced by the British. And you really
これだから英国に今まで支配され
don't
てきたから、
see UK playing a big role in what has been happening
これまで未だにイギリスのなんて影響力が大きいんだよ
in the
ね。
last couple of weeks. Russians are playing the role. The Turkish, as you said, are playing the role. Iranians are playing the role.
ただロシアはあんまり関与してないんだよ。
So I think we are having a paradigm shift. Instead of relying on the Americans and the British to sort out the difficulties, we are having a much more diverse number of countries pushing out the traditional colonial powers. And I think this is actually a welcome news for everybody here.
Sharmini in Beirut, another thing that I find very worrisome is how does Saudi Arabia de-escalate? Can it? I mean, look what it's doing in Yemen. Okay, it doesn't work, then keep doing it. Doesn't work, keep doing it. I mean, this is what bothers me the most, is that they don't have a nuance. Every great power, what makes them great is that they have options. And I see the Saudis just narrow and narrow and narrow their options. It's irrational. It is against their national interests. Go ahead.
これ彼言ってるのはさ、サウジがやってるのはもう、どんどん狭い方向に行って、イラッシュナルだから非合理的だっつってね。だから要するにイエメンなんかやってても、本当にこういう、勝ち目があるのって彼言ってる。
I agree with you. This is very worrisome because in sort of very recent years, we have actually not seen Saudi Arabia back down.
バックダウンって降参するね。
And it's a new kind of Saudi Arabia we're seeing, because certainly with the last king and the ones before them, a line of brothers and half brothers who essentially understood their position in their region. Sometimes they would be in a position of strength, and other times more vulnerable. And they have explored things like diplomacy in a way that we're not seeing with this Saudi Arabia that seems to be run by the aging king's son, the deputy crown prince, or Mohammed bin Salman. So it's a different kind of energy. I'm not sure if we will see Saudi Arabia back down, which is why I have brought up earlier in the show that we may see a situation where force may be used in this scenario or another one.
Mohammed in Washington, we discussed in the beginning of this program, I posed my first question, is that do the Saudis have in mind a forced regime change in Doha? But
ドーハってカタールの首都ね。
No, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to conceive that the entire Saudi royal family is at even more risk now by going out and taking this risky action. I mean, the Saudi economy is not, okay, they went on a buying spree of $1/3 trillion, but they're facing a lot of very serious problems in their economy. And now they go on these foreign adventures, where they have their colleagues in the council, and they're not, well, they'll go along with it, but I don't see a whole lot of enthusiasm. I think the royal house of Saud is putting itself at really perilous risk. Go ahead, Mohammed.
I think we have two issues here. First one, there is a dominant group thing belief across leaders in Riyadh, where they look at the whole region and the whole U.S. Gulf relations through the prism of counterterrorism on the one hand, and on the other, I think there is also this overcapitalization in future Trump's foreign policy, as if they are investing in him to be their guy and to restore the power of their influence in Washington and beyond. And I think this is where I'm asking myself, was it the Trump factor or probably the Trump curse that brought us to this escalation with irrational thinking? Yeah. It's a paradigm of realpolitik that has no nuances of the Gulf relations. On the other hand, whether the Saudis, the Emiratis will push for a regime change in Doha, I think it's too far. We are maybe pushing the envelope, but what is certain is there has been an attempt for the last 3 years how to contain Qatar and how to undermine the underdog that has outperformed the big guys in political, diplomatic, and also media influence. I think this is where this uneven relations and egos, there are inflated egos now that are talking about the elimination or the isolation. What I am afraid of is that how far we can push Qatar, because now we are paving the way for two regional powers to get into the Gulf, the Turks and the Iranians. And I think there will
だから、サウジがカタールをね、追いやっちゃった後、彼が言ったトルコとイランがね、いるじゃないで
be
すか。
time when the Saudi leadership will realize that it will no longer, hold or, it will no longer be able to do anything. In other words, the Turkish and the Saudi influence will be within the border of Saudi Arabia, which is perceived to be their number, and especially Iran. So I think now we are bringing
サウジってトルコと国境線を持ってるんですよね。
this
うん。だから今言ってボーダーって言って。
neo-Shia Sunni conflict to the border of Saudi Arabia.
That's very interesting what we heard from Mohammed.
これね、ちょっとこれビデオでやってるから映しにくいんだよね。
I mean, when you compare, I'm thinking about the tweets that Donald Trump had about your country and terrorism, and then the kind of tweets that he had before the election about Saudi Arabia. Can you give me a sense of the regional thinking here? I mean, this is very two different mindsets here coming from the same man over the course of 6 months. Okay, what has happened? And in the capitals of the region, I mean, what's the level of trust? Because we don't know what a Trump foreign policy is. All we know is it's very confusing rhetoric, and his underlings are not saying the same thing he is. This is very destabilizing. Go ahead, Taran.
トランプの意見がね、安定してないからね、どうなんだって。
Yes, you remember the campaign that Donald Trump several times said that ISIS was created by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. In fact, one time he was asked, what you are saying is that the U.S. foreign policy contributed to the creation of ISIS, and his answer was no.
まあ実際には、あれだよね、オバマとヒラリーがアイシスに支援して作っちゃったと思うんだよね、実際はね。彼が、イランの人が彼が言ってる正しいよね。
Meant that they established ISIS, they created ISIS. So this is what he said 6 months ago.
はい。
Now we have a terrorist attack. He is tweeting in a manner that is disturbing, especially to the families of the victims of this terrorist attack. Blaming the victim for very, very much blaming the victims of this terrorism for an entity that 6 months ago he was saying that the U.S. government created. So this is troublesome. I think the major difficulties that we have here is not a fight between Shias and Sunnis. I think it's more a geopolitical fight.
彼だから面白く言ってるのは、スニとシアの戦いじゃないって言うんだね。
The political fight. These issues of traditions and sectarian ideas are used to advance geopolitical difficulties that countries have. Iran has been supporting Hamas for many.
ハマスはスニなんだよね。だからイランはだからハマス支援してくる。ハマスはシアじゃないんだ。
Yes, Hamas is actually a Sunni organization.
スニって言ってるでしょ。
Policy has been to support organizations that are fighting hegemony, the Israeli hegemony or American hegemony in this part of the world. And if Sunnis do that, Iran supports them. If Shias do that, Iran supports them. In fact, the support that Iran is giving to Qatar now is Qatar is a Sunni country.
カタールはスニで、ワファービなんだよね。カタール。
So
Saudi
this is not how Iran thinks. And I don't think the Saudis are interested in Sunni Islam. They're generally supporting Wahhabis, which are not Sunnis. They kill Sunnis on a daily basis. And they're also trying to advance their foreign policy. The only problem is that the activities, the actions that they're taking is actually hurting their foreign policy.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump in here. I'd like to notice that their interests are the interests of the
それ開
royal
けて食べ
family.
た
I think that is very, very
どう
good.